Welcome to Pain with a Purpose, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories of resilience, redemption, and purpose. I'm your host, Chris Woods, and each week we will sit down with guests who have faced challenges with substance abuse, mental health, and recovery. But we're not just dwelling on the past. Instead, we'll explore what keeps them driven towards a purposeful life. Join us as we navigate the journey from pain to a purpose. Welcome back to Pain with a Purpose, Season 2, Episode 4 with Kim Harari, Kim H, as I like to call you. I know that we've been trying to connect. I think we were trying to figure it out before we actually met up tonight, but 6-7 months we've been trying to do this?
Yeah. And
I've just been so busy. No, but you have a lot going on, and we'll talk about all that stuff. Last time you were getting ready for High Rocks, right?
Yes.
And then this time you're getting ready for High Rocks
again. Yep. So it's kind of coming full circle.
How crazy is getting ready for that? What does that actually entail?
A lot.
I'm sure.
I guess for me, it was new to train in that intensity, and also my mindset of I'm not good enough for this.
Yeah.
So fighting that, the first time I wanted to opt out after my second week in training. I was like, this is not for me. I'm not a runner. But it's a lot of discipline and just really, really pushing yourself.
Do you have to change your diet as you're leading up to something huge like that?
With the intensity of the exercise, yes.
Yeah.
So I got to make sure that I'm eating enough of nutrient-dense foods, sleeping enough hours of the night, in a routine, basically. Because if not, then I'm jacked up the next day.
Yeah. I don't think I'll ever get to that point. I mean, you never say never, but I have no idea. So kind of to learn a little bit about you, right? You went through a bunch of stuff. I don't know how I connected with you, but I know that we aligned on some sense, and I was like, hey, you should get on the podcast. Yeah. What did it look like for you, as a child? What did your upbringing, where are you from?
So I was born in Israel.
Okay.
My father is Swiss.
Mm-hmm.
So his side of the family lived in Europe. My mom's side of the family lived in Israel. And I grew up there until I was 7 years old. And then we moved to the States.
Okay. So my daughters are 7. So you definitely remember a good amount of your, a little bit of your life over there.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Do you go over there and visit every once in a while?
I try to go at least once a year.
Okay.
Depending on work and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very special place.
Yeah.
For me.
It's a holy place.
Yeah.
Sacred place. All right. So you came over here at 7. And then where did you always stay in Philadelphia, or where were you?
So we moved to North Jersey.
Okay.
We moved to a little town right outside New York City, and stayed there, learned how to speak English first and second.
So this
grade.
is I didn't know that. Okay. So this is your second language?
It is my second language. Hebrew was my first. So I felt very different, obviously, in school. And the red hair was not a cool thing back then either.
Yeah.
So I always had this complex of I'm different, or not in a cool, unique way, but in a weird, uncomfortable, insecure way.
Yeah.
And then I moved to another town in 3rd grade after my parents got a divorce.
Okay.
Which was pretty close to. And I stayed there throughout grade school and high school. And then high school is when things kind of shifted.
Went in a different direction.
Yeah.
But you didn't make it over to Philly or anything like that?
Not till 2016.
Okay. All right. So through high school, I know from our previous conversations, you played a good bit of competitive soccer.
Yeah.
Right. I did as well, although I was not a cardio guy. I just ended up being a keeper my entire life. Although my freshman and sophomore year, I was gifted enough that I did start, and I played defense, but it was not the position that I usually played. And then once my time came, I stepped in, right? But I know that like what goes into playing competitive, high school sports, and then also playing competitive club ball as well. Like it can be a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Sure. Like how is that, like, did that play a part in your life? Like when you did end up, like when things started going a different way?
Yeah. So I would say soccer was like my first relationship, right? My first romance. In a way, and my first attachment as well. Because at a young age, I mean, I'm still discovering who I am, right? Like it changes all the time, and there's different versions of who we are. Um, but moving into the States, right? I couldn't speak Hebrew, but I could play soccer. So I feel like soccer kind of had a universal language. That made me feel a part of, or like that I was good at something. And I wasn't really good at school. I wasn't good at waking up on time. I wasn't good at making my bed. So the only thing that like my parents, or at the time, what I felt like they would talk highly of me, related to soccer.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of pressure in grade school, but then in high school, as I discovered that I'm better and went on a club team and we travel for different showcases on a collegiate level or to get recruited, that's when the pressure started increasing. And with that came anxiety. Not to mention, your standard dysfunctional family stuff, or schmutz, as I like to call it.
Yeah. I don't think any family's normal, right?
No, absolutely not.
Some may be worse than others. But like we all interpret it our own way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean the easiest way to say it, right, is like normal's what is it, the setting on the drying machine or something like that?
Yeah.
Like it's normal's not really a thing. But yeah, chaos was my normal.
Right. Exactly.
And I grew up in a loving house. Yeah. So then did the showcases that you went on, did you do like ODP or did you do like, Olympic development program, or did you do just like more high level club?
More so high level club.
Yeah.
But all the showcases that we did, we'd have recruiters.
Yeah.
There, and then we get invited to go, over the summer to a camp where I went to UNC. And I had a lot of potential there, right? My parents invested a lot in me. And I was introduced to weightlifting at 14 years old, right? As my parents were like, all right, this is the only thing she's really going to be successful at getting into college. So we're going to invest in that. And, I do remember having so much anxiety on the field, right? And that really didn't start till I was like 16, 17 years old. And, I referenced it to recovery and everyday life and therapy and growth. And it's like, you can have all the tools, right? During practice, I can crush it, during a scrimmage. And then when it comes to like stepping onto the field, that's when it's kind of like do or die. Like, can you actually apply?
I think it's a very real thing, right? And I don't know like how deep of the therapy route you went, like early on. But like I know that sports performance therapy is very much its own niche thing.
Yeah. There wasn't that back then for me.
Well, I mean, I don't think that they even knew what to do with me back then. Really, it was like if I didn't perform well, it was because, unfortunately, sorry, Mom, it was because I was withdrawing. And if I had a great game, it was because I was high as a kite.
Right.
And like that doesn't make sense, right? Because like especially with what I struggled with a little bit of what I know you struggled with, like you're not supposed to like be able to perform like that on like copious amounts of opiates.
Absolutely.
But like that's where I was just getting well at that point. Yeah. So when did it start to like turn? Because like the anxiety is a real thing, especially in the field. Did you start using in high school, or like did you know you had a problem in high school, or was it much later?
So it was, in high school. So I remember having my first drink, and it was New Year's, and I was still learning English, and I was like 7 years old, and my parents gave me like a sip of champagne, or, a little kitty cup of champagne, and I just remember it was, can I curse? fucking great, you know?
Yeah.
And that was it. And then when I go to Switzerland to visit my cousins, they'd sneak like a little bit of wine or whatever, right? Nothing crazy. But when I was playing high school soccer, I had this complex and identity of like, I'm a soccer player. So I remember sitting in biology class and I had this kid next to me and he's like, hey, we're going to smoke weed after school. You should join us. And I was like offended that he would ask me in a way of like a little bit entitled, you know, like, don't, you know, I'm going to go play in college type of thing. You know, and obviously that turned into a whole thing and he didn't go to rehab. I did. But with all that being said, I went through an injury playing soccer. I had injuries before and I knew they mentally, you know, fucked me up for lack of a better term. And this injury was pretty bad and it got to the point where I needed surgery, right? And I was 16 years old and I got prescribed oxys, you know, which is an opioid. And at the time they didn't tell us this is addictive or this is dangerous. They were just like, you know, take 2 every 4 hours and you'll feel better. And that's when that all really started going downhill for me.
Was it your knee?
Ankle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I said it once before on a podcast. I don't think my mom listens to all my podcasts. I mean, like that's a whole supportive woman in my life. Like for 10 years straight, every month on the 28th, she shoots me a text, right? Like, hey, you know, so glad you're still doing. But I say all that just because I went through a whole knee surgery. I faked an injury. Right?
Okay.
Went through a whole knee surgery. I was never injured.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Got my meniscus shaved down at Novacare.
Okay.
Rothman Institute.
Okay.
They came out, they were like, yeah, we shaved it. It was like slightly severed. I'm like, okay. Just so I could get a prescription.
Okay. So you were using prior to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And like, that's how sick I was. Right. So it's like,
my
two
first
opposite
thought is
ends.
Clever, but yeah.
It was clever at the time.
Right.
Except I was like, the anxiety was real leading up to it because I could not use leading up to it. And I know that they were like having conversations like, hey, no blood thinners. And like, I know that opiates are a blood thinner.
Yeah. And
I used like the day before and I was like, they're not going to operate on me. And they did. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went through a whole surgery.
Wow.
Was never even hurt. Wild shit that I did.
Yeah.
I digress. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
All right. So you messed up the wheel.
Yes.
And you had to get surgery, but yours was real.
Yes. It was.
And then they gave you the prescription. And then that's when like the lights came on or.
Yeah. So I remember, you know, I broke my foot in like the 4th grade and I remember just sobbing. Right. And I didn't think like I'm going to play in college then. And then I've had some knee injuries since playing basketball and whatnot. So I was used to being on crutches, but at that point at 16 and not being able to play for 3 months. And that's like going into junior year.
It's a crucial time.
Exactly. So I panicked. Right. And at this point I was like kind of going out with the cool kids, have a drink here and there, not during the season. I was still trying to be responsible with it, but that almost, you know, we talk about temptation meets opportunity. And now my whole identity is like ripped from underneath me.
Yeah.
And then everybody's partying, right? So the social acceptability part of it. And it felt good. I remember taking the pills and I was like, you know, I was able to be present without being present, if that makes sense, right? So it shut off my brain and I wasn't thinking about the future. I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't thinking, period, you know? And that's really was a relief for me at the time. And again, at 16, like you don't know how to emotionally regulate, you know? Some of us still struggle, right? Emotionally regulating at times. But so I started partying and going out and people, you know, were taking their mother's Xanax. And, you know, I lived in like this area where most of the moms were on Xanax. And they let kids have parties in their basements as long as they were home and stuff like that. So there are a lot of opportunities to party. right? And people found out that I had oxys. I learned more about them, right? And it was at that time where like it became a really big thing.
Yeah. I mean, what year was this?
2010.
Yeah. So it was in the thick of it.
Yeah.
When like we really had no clue what we were doing. We did know that what we were doing was not right.
Right.
But like we had no idea that like this was going to set me up for the next however many years of my life.
Absolutely.
Some would say ruin my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had no idea.
Yeah.
Especially if you had them. You were the most popular kid.
Exactly.
So I'm sure it didn't get any better from there.
No,
Although at the time it probably felt like you were the man, right?
In a social setting.
You know what I mean? You were the woman,
the
whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. In the social setting. And I remember like, I remember having thoughts of, I can't keep partying like this because I'm not going to recover, but it feels so good. And it was so easy to just like, put this away. And again, now at 31 years old, I have times where I'm like, ooh, I shouldn't be doing this, and I'm in denial about it. But then it was so easy to justify, and everybody was doing it. All the smart kids were doing it, all the athletes, the football players, and they all went to college on scholarships,
So, and I don't know, we haven't gotten there, but like, have some of those people still had not had to go through the pain that like we went through, and like they just put it down?
Some just put it down.
Right. And
some
those
died.
Well, of course. Yeah.
But
some
a lot
are like us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But a lot put them down. And I don't know what their life looks like today, per se. I know some friends, but
I'm not one to judge, right? Like it could be really good. It could be there's still a struggle. It doesn't matter. But like that thought of like, I grew up with people that like I started using with, I grew up with people that put it down, and I'm like, maybe I can. And like I suffered for a long time thinking that like I could get out of rehab every single time and be like, I'll just drink. Yeah. Right. Or I'll just smoke tree. Or granted, like you in high school, like I didn't smoke weed. Like I was like, I'm not like that. You know what I mean? Stayed sick for a long time. Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. So I don't know why we went through or why we continue to identify that I have it. I don't question it. Right. And I don't understand why they don't, but it is what it is.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And again, like, I used to sit and think about that a lot and be like, it's not fair that they got out of it. They went to college. They have, great careers. And this was before I had a business and all that, right? In my early mid-20s. And again, I wouldn't trade my life right now for what it could have been. I don't know what it could have been. If I went to college, it would have probably been a lot worse. Even though I did think, okay, I'll stop the pills when I'm in college because I'm going to be playing soccer, and I'll still, drink here and there. But I just wanted to get out of my environment. I thought it was an issue with my family. I thought it was an issue with my mother, who, is my best friend now, but who worked all the time and wasn't around, and the divorce and all that, those things. I completely placed blame on that. And I was like, once I'm out of here, I'm not going to need to do all this. I'll do it because I'm enjoying it. I'm not going to do it because I'm depressed. And I even like convinced my therapist at the time, and she brought my parents in, and they're like, you really need to treat her better.
You fed her a whole narrative.
Absolutely. Yep. And I believed it.
Well, it's our perception, right? Without getting like too deep, because like we just don't have time for it. Right. Like if you would have asked me before I got sober, right, or even like really early in the 12 steps, I would have told you that like my mom was a bitch, right? Like my grandmom was like miserable. My grandfather was a piece of, and like whatever. I would have came up with this whole thing.
Absolutely.
And that's not the truth at all. Like my mom worked 2 jobs to put me through a good school. Yeah. We'll take a loan out. I'm pretty sure we'll take a loan out every single year just to make sure that she didn't have to make a monthly payment on school. Right. And then pay it off on the back end. Yeah. But it's our perception. Absolutely. Which can be skewed today too. Absolutely. All right. So to speed it up a little bit. Yes. At some point you got clean. Yes. But we won't get all the way there just yet. Okay. Because I know that you had made some attempts prior to like this bout. Yeah. like what, like, okay, so walk me through. I'm sure you didn't just do like perk fives
Right.
your entire,
Right.
you know what I mean? Although some people burn their life to
Yeah,
the ground like that.
absolutely.
Without getting too much into it, like what really happened, and then like what brought you to maybe not like what sits in front of me today, but essentially like started to like set that path up for what sits in front of me. Yeah.
Right. So in high school, the perks became Oxy 80s and those, Roxys and Xanax and all those things, right? And cocaine and whatever really I could get my hands on at that point, and I dabbled with heroin, but nothing crazy. And I ended up in treatment at 17 years old, senior year of high school.
Okay.
After another injury that I had in December and of my senior year. And then, I went to treatment. I stayed there for 4 months. I turned 18. They took me to a halfway house in like middle of nowhere, New Jersey. And I stayed clean for 4.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you stay clean for 4.5 years? Was it really just like almost like a scared straight type deal? Or was it like, I actually like you participated in your recovery? Like, what did that look like?
So I think for me, the most eye-opening thing at 18 in treatment is I remember, well, we weren't allowed to have makeup, right? We couldn't smoke cigarettes because I was in the adolescent unit, right? And, I was so consumed with what the outside looked like, especially in high school. And developing, I think for the first time, I developed a sober, right, platonic, intimate relationship with another human being as is, right? Like naked, not literally naked. My roommate see me naked, but you know what I mean, right? Yeah. I could, and that felt really good and foreign. So it was
like your first genuine like relationship, connection. You know what I mean? Like connection, friendship that you had with somebody.
Right. Yeah. Like without judgment, right? Like I didn't have to hide what I did.
Or without them like wanting something from you or vice versa.
Exactly. And that's at 18. So you can only get so deep and intimate on a connection level. And then, when I went to the halfway house, same thing. I met like some older women and, I did a lot of therapy and I just really enjoyed the feeling of like trying to discover who I was. Right. And that just felt better than what was in high school. And at that point, I was at the halfway house for a year. I was participating in a 12-step fellowship. And eventually I just stuck with it. I enjoyed it. I was trying to get better. I had a lot of drive. My dream was to get a job at a treatment center. And I did at 22, making $15 an hour. And I thought I had arrived.
That's actually a really good,
right. Back
Couldn't
then.
tell you nothing.
Yeah. And, my first job was at Lowe's and some deli. And I was just excited to like be independent and on my own. And then I moved to the Poconos, which was like right over the bridge from where I was in Jersey. And kind of did my
so
thing
you were
there.
way up there in Jersey. Okay.
Yeah. And it worked.
There really is nothing up there.
Nothing at all.
I was up there for work not too long ago, and I was like, I pulled it up on the map, and I was like, I'm right by the Poconos. Like this doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's the ADD kicking.
No, you're good. You're good.
So you went to the Poconos.
Yeah. So I lived in the Poconos. I had my own apartment. My parents were super proud. I was paying my own bills. I got a job at a treatment center. I was getting a lot of praise there, right? And the feeling of being needed, right? Which is something that a lot of us, yearn. And it felt good to be needed, right? It felt like, okay, people trust or think that I have something that they want. And so I loved it. I loved working in the treatment center. I had a boyfriend at the time, which was obviously before I came out. And I was just like, living my little life in the Poconos. And then the relationship started going downhill. I started working a lot in the treatment center, taking overtime, they'd call me and be like, so-and-so's trying to leave, but they just want to talk to you, right? So I had this like cape on,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of filled the void while I was going through stuff in my relationship. And again, I'm like a 21-year-old kid. So now thinking back, or now when I look at a 21-year-old, they're like a baby, you know?
That's what's really scary. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so long story short there, I ended the relationship with the man.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice guy.
Didn't work out. Dude.
Right.
Listen,
Didn't work out.
Wasn't you. But...
Not for me in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And I started, I've always, I would make out with girls here and there in high school and whatnot. And I always had this attraction. And, I ended up getting involved. I had my first experience with a woman right after me and him split.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, this is great. Right. Mm-hmm. And so they always say your first girl is the roughest. I would say I've had much worse since, but
that'll be the second episode.
Right. Exactly. And, but yeah, so she ended up, said she was in recovery. She wasn't. She lived far away, was using. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And then I put on that cape and try to save the day, and so 8 months after doing that and dealing with that insanity, I ended up using, but shooting heroin this time.
And that's back when heroin was actually heroin.
Yes.
So we don't have to go through that whole thing, right? But like, if anybody's listening and knows that pain, right? Yeah. It kind of goes without saying. Right. It's very unique to yourself, but
yeah,
the pain's all the same, but like it's the real deal. And then when did you actually? So you went out, you shot dope, and then when did you come back around? Like, what brought you to this point?
So there's a few.
There's a few other
pit stops I'll touch on pretty quick, but I relapsed, freaked me out. I OD'd right away.
Oh, Jesus.
Resigned from my job because I was like, this isn't right. Went back to meetings and did my thing, but she was still living with me and I'm still trying to like control her habit while she's on house arrest.
Yep.
Yeah. So I would cop for her. Before I would cop for her. And then I'd go work in the treatment center with a bundle in my car.
Yeah.
Come home and give her a bag. And watch her do it to make sure she's okay.
I'm not a therapist by any means. I don't know if it's codependency or unconditional love.
Codependency.
But like, regardless, right? Like it's like we do some wild, like when we're wrapped up in it, like we will do some wild stuff.
Yeah.
Because like you didn't think there was probably, you might have felt a little
I
weird.
I knew I was like going down a slippery slope, but I also, and I feel the same way today about recovery. If I could just, bottle it up, right? Put a nice bow on it and send it in the mail to a bunch of people who need it. And all they had to do was drink it. I would do that in a heartbeat, right? Some people don't get the opportunity that we do or have the resources that we did to gain access to get what we have and get what we got.
Yeah.
So for me, I was always very into like helping people. And there's a huge genuine aspect to that, but there was also the aspect where it was like filling a void of being needed.
Yeah.
Right. So after I relapsed, within a month, I ended up in jail with her after going to visit her. So that was a little interesting story there.
It's probably a good one.
It is a good one. It is a good one.
Yeah. So, I mean, talk about like burning your life to the ground quick.
Right. Yeah. And I went to visit her out of my county. I was up for days. I was withdrawing. I was going to visit her daughter at her grandmother's house. And I stopped, visited her in jail. Then I was like, I'm not going to get high until I put the kid to bed. Right. And I was exhausted. So driving to her mom's house, which was like 20 minutes away from the jail, I was falling asleep just from being tired. I wasn't like under the influence at all at that point. And I got pulled over in that county. And that evening I was in jail with her.
We'll talk about, I mean, at the time it doesn't feel like it, but like, you want to talk about God, right?
Right.
Like, literally like trying to
Absolutely.
wake you up, right?
Yeah.
Having like your life come full circle.
Yeah. And in my eyes, I was like, I did not see it as that.
No, of course
whatsoever.
not.
You know, it was almost like, oh, what can go wrong will go wrong. That's just how my life is.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, so I did 2 months there, got out. She stayed in. And then the ego came in of, I know what to do. Right. I had 4.5 years clean. I only used for a month. And I got in jail. You know what I mean? I ended up in jail.
Yeah.
Right. But I didn't even see that was a correlation. And then I put myself in a recovery house in Lancaster.
Okay.
Right. Because I knew people from working at a treatment center. So, you know, I did what I had to do. I made some money. I put myself in a recovery house, put her in one when she got out. And then we just repeated the same cycle for the next 1.5 years of using, getting kicked out of recovery houses, sending her to treatment, detoxing cold turkey, you know, and it just continued to progressively get much, much worse.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah. Well, I mean, when we're wrapped up in it, like I see it frequently, right? But it's like, and when like, if you were to like be a fly on the wall in your own life, when like all this was going down, you would have been like, well, what the fuck are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, clearly there's something here or multiple things that like are greatly contributing to like, you know, the shit going wrong.
Yeah.
Much like probably how your family was or your loved ones or your friends but we just can't hear it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, that's wild. Dark time, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm trying to think timeline wise, right? So we're almost in 2025. So that was like 10 years ago, around 2015.
Okay.
Right. Which means I was 21, 22. We're probably going on 23 at some point. But yeah, again, looking back at a 23-year-old going through that and doing all those things, right? Just in a way to survive, with knowing what recovery is like.
Yeah.
So having 4.5 years clean before, and now I'm living with 12 other girls and a drug dealer and my girlfriend, you know, doing whatever they tell us to do.
So you're not talking about the recovery house?
Not the recovery house, a different house.
Yeah.
But
which is its own, you know, thing, right?
Right. Absolutely.
But yeah. And that's the crazy part, right? It's like, you know how good recovery and life could be because you were clean. But again, like when we're in it, it doesn't matter if like your mother's standing in front of you to get you out, right? Or for me, like, you know, it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if Bill Wilson's standing in front of me. Like I can't stop unless I'm stopped, essentially.
Yeah.
The problem is that I can be stopped, like you were stopped when you got put in jail.
Yeah.
I can't stay stopped either, though.
Right. I went right back out after jail, you know, and did that whole thing for the next 1.5 years. And I, you know, remember having, I don't want to say a spiritual awakening, right? Because I had a lot of like aha moments throughout the entire time. The minute I relapsed, I was like, I don't want to be doing this. I'm just doing it to get well. I know it felt good for 30 seconds. I knew I just couldn't stop. And then it got to a point where we got wrapped up with the wrong people, right? And at that point, it's almost like you're brainwashed to believing that like this is what you have to do to get the next one. And you're almost lucky to be living at this house, right? And getting fed and, you know, and essentially doing all that. Like I remember I was in a hotel room and I was just like, what the fuck am I doing? And an hour later, I went and did it all over again.
Yeah.
So, and that just continued. Like I'd have those moments all the time. And I just thought I had to do this to protect my girlfriend at the time so she didn't have to, right?
Yeah.
And not to like beat around the bush too much, right? But it was, you know, we were involved in a brothel and sex work and a pimp.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they Is there a better word for that now or no?
I don't think
a
they've
manager.
come out, maybe a manager. I don't know. They haven't come out with one yet, though.
You know, and it got to the point where it's like, this is what we do to survive. And we felt safe in that environment, right? As if like we're protected and we're taken care of. And, you know, I remember there was a point where we had to leave because he got arrested and we had nowhere to go. So now we're like, we're going to do this on our own, right? To have money to stay in hotels. So now in my head, I'm choosing to do this, right? So it's not done to me. So I have some illusion of control.
Right.
And which also brought like a lot of shame when I first started like getting clean and working through that in therapy. I was like, that didn't happen to me. I did it. You know, like I'm a piece of shit for doing it, and that's that. I had to do it, and I was very like cold and hard and whatever. And I remember we just couldn't get the next one. And I always figured it out no matter what, right? And I just couldn't figure it out anymore. And I remember I was just like sitting in this attic. We lived in this attic with some guy I was bussing tables with, and I was like, I need to send her to rehab, and then I need to get my life together because I'm gonna die.
Yeah,
you know. So I ended up getting in trouble with the cops a little bit. Kind of got a slap on the wrist there. Send her to treatment. And the day I sent her to treatment, I went to treatment and then got shipped off to Philly.
Yeah. So you went to treatment down here?
No, I went to treatment in Reading.
Okay.
That was my 4th or 5th time. And I stayed there for 4 months.
Okay.
And then, right, I just remember being in detox and somebody coming in and they're like, so, you know, I was on a relapse unit for people that had years clean and relapsed. And they're like, you know, we know you're a part of a 12-step fellowship and you know the drill. And I was like, it doesn't matter. I'm still always gonna use. Like I was like, I'm just here to sleep and eat. And but I don't think I'll ever be able to stay clean. I was like, I'll put together 5 years and then I'll use again. You know? And again, something kind of changed in there and I started having that hope again. And I went to a recovery house in West Philly in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
West Philly, like on campus or like in West Philly?
West Philly.
Okay.
Well, 39th and Spring Garden.
No, that's not where it was. I don't know. Did you ever meet Chicklet by chance?
I did meet Chicklet.
So Chicklet and I grew up together. He was very close, very close to my heart. Yeah. Love his mom, love his family, the whole nine. We actually graduated from the same grade school, but he was in a recovery house at one point in West Philly.
West Philly,
but like on campus.
Okay.
And like he, you know, there's a whole story behind that. Right. That's why I know that there was like a house down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chicklet was the best.
He was.
Yeah.
Very good kid.
All right, so you went to a recovery house, and then the hope continued to kind of get brighter.
Yeah, and at that point, you know, I was so terrified of going back to, you know, being homeless or living with a drug dealer or having to, you know, engage in sex work. Or I just did not want that anymore, especially because once I was in treatment and started feeling my emotions again, the trauma behind that was so overwhelming, right? Like I wasn't experiencing it during because I was just numbing myself. Yeah. And the moment I started actually having like intimate connections with other human beings and feeling that type of intimacy, all the other shit kind of kicked up. And I was like, this is brutal.
Yeah, this is like what I just went through and what I just did for the last 2 years is fucked up. I can't.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm terrified. So I went to West Philly and I was like, I'm doing whatever people tell me to do, you know, with probably still wanting to kind of do something my way. But I was like 98% locked in. If he told me to do a backflip, I was going to learn how to do a backflip if that meant I was going to stay clean.
And then, so to fast forward a little bit, right? Just because I know a little bit after like the first time we talked, right? I know you stayed clean for a number of years.
Right.
And then fell off, right?
Yes.
For lack of better terms. And then got back on, fell off again, got back on. How many times? So it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Because like the whole message behind that, and it's mine as well, is like, if I'm not doing what I need to do for myself, whether that be 12 steps, whether that be like a recovery meeting, whether that be therapy, whether that be like doing something every day to like put me in a better place than I was the day before. I am a very firm believer that like I have this 24-hour reprieve, if you will.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to look to a T, like how I originally got sober, right? Like I found my safe place, if you will, right? And where I kind of, try to get better each day.
Yeah.
But essentially, if I'm not doing that, like my story is very much like yours. Like I will fall off, and eventually I'll do what I do.
Yeah.
But in the midst of all that, when you got clean, whether it be that time or whenever this like most recent times was, I think I connected with you via Instagram.
Yes.
Because like I don't really know how. Like when I first started this thing, I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
So I just started searching on Instagram. I don't know if it was like recovery or hashtag recovery fitness or like hashtag recovery whatever, but like I came across your page, and then there was like a write-up, not like a bad write-up, but like a good write-up, about like your story, and it was on your page, I think, and it was like something about like the Fitler Club and like recovery,
right?
And that's when I was like, I gotta connect with this girl. So like, how did all that happen? Because I'm sure you didn't just go to the gym one time,
right?
And next thing you know, you became a very well-known trainer at the Fitler Club.
So I get, I'm trying to like find the timeline here that makes sense, but I was at the recovery house in West Philly for 3 months, moved to Fishtown, right? And at that point, I was probably 30 pounds heavier than I am, smoking a pack of Newports.
Don't talk bad about Newports. They're good.
A day.
I might go back to them because this vape's going to kill me. But
you probably quit quicker than quitting the vape with a Newport.
Probably.
Yeah. But anywho, so, and there was this guy in recovery who was like, oh, I heard you used to play soccer. We go to the gym. Kind of was like, in my home group, they were scooping me under their wing. And I was like, I'm not going to the fucking gym. I'm like 6 months off heroin. And I knew like it's going to fuck me up because I used to love being active, right? And moving my body. And I didn't know the reason behind it. It was because it's like such a great source of like moving stuck energy. And there's endorphins and all these other hormones that come into play. I just knew it made me feel good, right? And so I went to the gym once. I did like a 10-minute thing with him. And I said, fuck this. And I went upstairs. It was Retro Fitness on 17th of Spring Garden. And I sat on the corner and chain smoked Newports until he was done. Right. And then we went back the next day and the next day. I kept smoking, but I started like feeling better. Right. Kind of like the longer you stay
I'm ripping
clean.
This thing while you're saying.
Right. It's fine. I'm about to pop this in and we're going to cut that part out.
Yeah.
And that's how I started like getting back into just a more active and healthy lifestyle, right? In the interim, I was working at this graphic design warehouse, right, in North Philly, in the hood. And, like the vinyl you wrap cars with.
Yeah.
So I was the girl who peels the vinyl off the car. I wasn't doing
you didn't even have the good job.
No, I didn't have the good job, right? And I was making like $11 an hour cash. And, but I was just so happy to like, I had food stamps at the time, but just have some cash in my money and show up to work and go to the gym. I was just like, I'm doing this thing. And, it's funny how happy you are with like less in certain points in your time, right? Or in your life rather. So I would have a blowtorch and these huge like green drop. Do you know the green drop trucks?
Yeah.
And I would just stand on a scaffolding with a blowtorch. You got to heat it up.
And then eventually it'll come down.
And it would come down. Right. And I would tape boxes. I would put them in boxes and whatnot. So I did that for like a year.
Mhm.
And then I went to the gym and there was a job opening and somebody was like, oh, you look like, you've been a trainer, you have good form. We're hiring. And I was like, I'm good.
Mhm.
And my friend was like, just take the job. And I was like, I don't have a certification. And they're like, there's a really cheap one. Just try it. Right. So in my head, I'm like, all right, I'm not going to study. I'm just going to take the test. It's $99. If I pass, then I'll audition for the job. So I didn't study. I passed, auditioned for the job, got the job. And that was the beginning of, my fitness journey into, starting my own business eventually. But so as I put together Clean Time, through that, I worked at City Fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got recruited by the Fitler Club. And while I was at the Fitler Club, I decided to share on social media that I'm in recovery. I never really at that level exposed that. I was an open book if somebody asked me, but I didn't share it with the world. And then that got some, feedback and an article with Philly Mag. And then people started reaching out to hear more about my story, right? And from the Fitler Club, I went to Rumble Boxing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to keep going or you got a question?
I mean, you're on a roll now.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Because the build up's real, because you just ended, it was, I don't know if that was a period or a comma, but
both. But
it's only because I know, right? Because we spoke.
Right.
Yeah, so COVID hit. And I heard a bunch of stories about, not about you, but about people that are like us,
mm-hmm.
that our worlds kind of got turned upside down.
Right.
I fortunately didn't experience a lot of that, because I still had a job. I still had although I couldn't go to the job, but I was working from home the best I could. My kids were home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was insane.
Right.
But much like yourself, if you were a trainer,
right.
I didn't even think about people that had jobs like that one day you're employed, everything's going well. Next
mm-hmm.
thing, COVID happens and they're like, tough shit, figure it out.
So can I take a break to get us in?
Yeah.
Okay. You can send this part.
I will.
But
I sleep with a Zen in.
Oh, so do I.
Mm-hmm.
I wake up at 6:30 and then I'm like, I put a Zen in and then I snooze for half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
The best. These are peach too.
Are they Zens?
Yeah, but they're from
overseas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See how we're doing. Yeah. All right, so it's not like we just took a Zen break.
No.
But yeah, so the COVID hit, and essentially your life got flipped upside down overnight.
Right.
Not overnight. After you figured out that we weren't going back to work in 2 weeks.
Right. So right before COVID, right, there was this job, or Rumble Boxing,
mm-hmm.
and I remember I took a class, my friend's class in New York City, and I fell in love with the experience and the feeling that I had during and after class, right? And in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm going to work here. Never boxed before in my life, right? So they opened up a location in Philly, and I started taking classes. Then I started working with a boxing coach, and that was my mission,
mm-hmm.
right? And so I did everything I could. I auditioned, I think 3 times, didn't get it.
Really?
Right.
Okay.
The audition process was pretty intense. And then I finally got it, right? And at that point, the feeling of working so hard towards something and achieving it, which a lot of people have experience of, but in my past, up until that point, the only thing that I felt achievement in was getting clean.
Yeah.
Right? Not working towards a job or graduating with a 4.0.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated with a 2.4.
Yeah.
And so it was so rewarding, right? And at the same time, I got this sense of, which is good and bad, but I can do whatever the fuck I put my mind to,
mm-hmm.
right?
Stay clean if I want to.
Right.
Or use when I want to and not use when I want to. Yeah.
Exactly. And now we're getting into that. So I was in like a very excited place in my life when it hit. And then, we got let go from the Fitler Club. We had the options to do some online stuff, right? And now I'm in like hustle mode, And I remember I lived by myself on 10th and Chestnut, right by Jefferson, which was a little bit anxiety provoking.
Also not
growing
cheap.
up with a Jewish mother, it was very
Yeah.
So and I was just, I built a website right before the pandemic, right? Because one of my mentors was like, people are asking about your recovery and your story. You need to have a website. This is going to go somewhere. And I was like, well, I don't even have a business. And she was like, trust me, let's get this started. So I already had that starting, right? And me and my friend Shannon put on this event, right? And we called the event brand or the event Come Alive 215.
Okay.
Which then developed into our event brand eventually. So I was just literally DMing people all day. And people were DMing me, are you still training? Are you still training? So I put together a schedule and I put together workouts. And honestly, I want to get back to that level of motivation today, right? Like sometimes I'm like, how the fuck did I do that? Right. And stuff just started flowing and coming, right? And I was, I think, in that survival mode of like, I thought everybody was going to die, and so I was just like hustling from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. and then watching movies, but working on the website all the time. And then we got asked to put on more virtual events.
Okay.
And creating is honestly what I think got me through the pandemic, right? So I recognize that I really enjoy just the act of like creating something, right? And like creation and coming up with ideas and bringing people together and community. And it wasn't even the fitness aspect of it, but it was the ability that I, had a channel through fitness to create stuff, right? And with that also impact and help people. So I had like a fire under my fucking ass. Now, at the same time, I stopped attending meetings. I lost touch with people in recovery as well, which, is important to have a community. I had a community outside of it that was really healthy. But again, everybody was with their families or significant other. My family was in New York, right? I lived by myself. I got a dog, which gave me even more anxiety. But so work was really like all I had. Right. And the contact with clients and putting on class and conversations like that was the only intimacy I experienced.
Yeah.
And at the core of it, I was so fucking lonely and scared. And at the same time, I was able to experience this reprieve. Right. And so a year goes by. We're putting on these events. We get the Best of Philly award. During the pandemic, right? I started a business and my ego, I think, got a little big. Also in a way of like being proud of myself, but like, look at what I can do. And all these, people in recovery were like, not talking shit, but they're like, she's not coming around. She's not going to meetings. She's going to use. And I'm like, I'm actually thriving in life.
That, mixed in with like us not talking to like our support network, essentially whoever our day-to-day people are in recovery.
Right.
Yeah. Like our ego is going to get inflated.
Right.
It's like our baseline.
Absolutely.
And then like the pride takes over and you're like, no, I'm actually doing much better than all of you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think since I've been 17, all I've known is recovery and raging drug addiction, right? Like no in between. And, for people that aren't in recovery, what we have to do is on a daily basis, like take inventory of our motives and behaviors and intentions and how we treat people, right? So we're in a constant state of reflection, which is a lot sometimes and overwhelming as well. but I know it's necessary to stay clean, and for us, it's like our lives are on the line, right? So I was so far removed from that because I was so focused in business and giving, and I wasn't really interacting with people where I had to think of my intent. My intention was to pay my rent and make money and not lose my mind completely during the pandemic, right? And not get COVID. That was it.
But not so much like being transparent the way that we used to be, right?
Exactly.
So
like
or
there
being
wasn't
like vulnerable,
the opportunity to do that, right? And there were for people that were continuously going to meetings and in contact, but I just was either in a complete state of anxiety or in a complete state of creating and creation, right?
Did you almost like find yourself, like hindsight's 2020, like when you were doing all of that, right? And you were coaching a ton of people, right? Like during COVID, whether it be virtual or in person, right? But like maybe some of those people were also in recovery, but did you have this thought of like, well, I got to put on this persona of like being strong and things of that nature to not feel, or not to like let them know that I'm struggling or whatever the case may be?
So I don't think I felt that per se. Like I think I was pretty open even with talking to friends and how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm a complete mess, but then I'm totally fine as well at the same time. So it was like this weird duality of two complete opposites, right? But within those opposites, I'm completely disconnected from self.
Yeah.
So at that point, right, I moved, I put on more events, I stopped going to meetings. And as we started like, removing the masks and going out, I started dating and going on the apps and all that shebang, right? And I was hanging out with somebody, and I remember I just missed intimacy, period. Not that there was like any conversation with this person that, gave any type of intimate vibes, but just like having somebody to talk to, right? And I was being a lot more social. And I remember it got to a point where I just wanted to have a glass of wine and with a cheese plate as a productive member of society and a businesswoman, right? I've never businesswoman.
Nothing wrong with that. Like,
right.
yeah, because that's what we do, right?
I
like
used
we drink
because I was mentally fucked up, not to like celebrate,
Yeah, because we drink wine and drink cheese.
Right. Like, yeah, absolutely. I'm shooting heroin in under a ditch,
but that's how sick we are, right? It's like, why would we? So someone from the outside looking in, right? And like, I get it to a T.
Right.
But like someone from the outside looking in being like, but Kim, with your past, like, why would you even ever believe that thought? Right. Because like, that's not, but no, that's how sick we are. Right. Where it's like, I'll convince myself like, well, I never really just tried to have a glass of wine and, maybe tried to go out and have a good dinner. Right. And I also never had a business, and I never had, so maybe it's different.
Right. I never had stuff on the line to lose. And, I do know the entire time that I was thinking about it, I was like, this is a slippery slope. It would be like a weird decision. Right. And also I think I had that sense of like, I can do whatever I want in life and be successful. Right. I don't see why this wouldn't be successful, having a glass of wine here and there.
Maybe the 6 other treatment stays, but
like I never went to dinner and had a glass of wine. I was again, stealing donuts from bodegas in the hood just so I could eat. Like that wasn't steak and wine and a bread basket. And I never had that, maybe in Switzerland with my family when I was 12. Yeah. But that was about it. And so I remember like thinking about it for a while. Now, mind you, this is a year after Philly Mag did an interview with me and, published that article. And then I did an interview with Fox and ABC. So now people know that I'm in recovery. Right. So I'm like, well, if I drink, people can't know that I'm drinking until like years go by. And I'm like, okay with it. Right. And I'm not going to tell anybody until
you can break the news. And they're like, well, I actually been doing this for you.
Right.
And I've been good. Yeah.
Right. And I was like, I'll tell my mother and my friends once like I can successfully do it for a year and nothing went to shit because I don't want to worry them. Right. And I want to be like, hey, by the way, I've been drinking for the past like 2 years and life is fine. you know? And I've seen people that it worked for, right? They got clean and they have a beer here and there. Now, do I actually know how well it's going for them? No, right?
But we'll tell ourselves that we do.
Exactly. So I remember one night I always, at that point, I had alcohol at home. Or when friends would come over, when I had a date, never bothered me, right? And I had this bottle of red wine and it's like 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, I'm just going to try it, you know? So I open it and first thing I did was smell it and then I put it away. And then I took a swig, but didn't swallow it. Just like tasted it, like nutty shit, you know, just like let my tongue taste it. And I'm like, wait, is this a relapse? Or, and I was like, no, you know, and then I poured a nice glass, you know, not the right amount, obviously. I just poured like a glass of water of wine, you know, because I was like, I don't have like a nice wine glass. I don't know what you know,
put it in a solo cup and you're just like, I'm just going to,
like a glass of water, like a tall glass of water.
Starting at the bottom, literally.
Right. And so I sipped it and I remember feeling that burn and I was like, oh, this is so good. I used to love wine, you know? And then I just kept sipping. Now I'm somebody that will go get a iced coffee at Starbucks for $8. And on the way from Starbucks to my car, I finish the iced coffee. Right. So I'll just slurp a drink down.
Yeah.
Any drink, water, whatever. So I just drank the whole thing pretty quickly. It's not like I sat there and tasted it and thought about the notes and what type of grape it was and what I could pair it with, you know? And then I went.
Wait, did you have the cheese?
No, there was no cheese at that point.
So
no, I was by myself trying it.
So we didn't even have the cheese.
No. Okay. No, I did have cheese at some point.
Maybe
quite
like
a few times.
like a bag of Mexican cheese. Like, just fine. Well, at least I got
Doritos.
Cheese. Yeah.
No, and I took a shower, and I remember in the shower, I was like, "Oh yeah, this is it," you know. And then I was like, "Oh fuck, this could be it," you know, and not in the good sense of it feels good. The next day, I was completely hungover. Right. I told one person, my one friend who's not recovering, and I said, hey, so like, you know, I had a drink and everything's fine. And I just need to be honest with somebody about it. Right. So now I'm taking what I learned in recovery and in therapy of like just being transparent and honest with another human being, no matter how bad the situation might be or secret or how much shame is around it. Right. Just find one other human being to be honest with. So I was like, I just want to be responsible and let you know I'm keeping it on the low. You know, I'm only going to like have a drink as a celebratory thing. Then I went on vacation with a friend in Mexico, drunk every single day, you know. Then I came back and everything was fine. But in the back of my head, I have this voice of like, I want more. Before I went out, I would drink, but then it didn't look like I would drink a lot when I was out. I also would go to the waiter and be like, hey, I would order after people order their drinks because I didn't want people to know that I'm drinking, you know? And again, because of the shame of it. And I didn't want to worry them and whatever. So I did that for 8 months, right? Within 3 months, I'm drinking from the time I wake up to the time I'm going to bed. I'm involved in a completely toxic relationship, right? That I would not have gotten involved in if I was not under the, you know, substance of any mood or mind altering substance at any point. I hope I wouldn't have gone into that anyways, but I did. And it was just like a thing. I was drinking 10 drinks a day, spread out. I wasn't wasted all day.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you were still training clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would, I'd go to Park and have an espresso martini in between.
You were trying to fool yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't be drunk. I would just have like a drink. I don't have
an issue because I'm at just like the nicest restaurant in Philadelphia. So there's no way. I
knew. I'd always look over my shoulder and be like, who's here? Right. And, but I also remember now I'm looking for things to do so I can have a drink because I started making rules for myself. So no alcohol at home. I'm not going to drink at home. I'm only going to drink when I'm out with friends. Right. And it's so normalized to just have a glass of wine every night of the week. I mean, a lot of people do it.
It is very normalized.
Especially after the pandemic, right? It was just a thing. So I'm like, all right, all these people are doing it and they're fine. I would have 2 and I don't want to be too hungover. And I remember I was like, ooh, I'm teaching class tomorrow. I'm not going to drink, right? And all those rules kind of just went out the window.
Yeah.
And I remember clearly I called my one friend. I was like, let's go get dinner. Let's go to salsa night or let's do this. And he's like, Kim, it's Tuesday. Just stay at home. And I was like, no, let's just grab a quick drink. Right. So then I started going by myself. But I went to like dive bars. So I wouldn't run into people in Philly.
Sure, yeah.
Because I would run into a lot of people in the city from being, involved in fitness and whatnot. And I remember one day I drove to the liquor store and I was like, I'm just not going to buy any alcohol for a week. And I still went there every single day. And I was driving back to my apartment and I was just like, I'm fucked. Right. In my head. I was just like, I can't stop, And, so again, I reached out to some other friends that knew about it and I was like, all right, just like keep me accountable or, and they're like, shouldn't you like be calling your sponsor or maybe going to those meetings or trying to stop? And it just got to the point where I couldn't stop and I had to get honest. And, some things happened that really were a huge, huge wake up call for me. And I ended up in the hospital. And since then I've been sober. Right. And I may have not, been homeless from it, but now I'm like somebody that has a business, is well known in the fitness community, has a dog, has a really nice apartment. There's a pool and like a gym and a community there in Old City. Right. I have a nice car. Like everything looks nice. And the second I'm home, I'm drinking. The second I wake up, I'm having wine. 3 hours later, in between clients, if I had a 2-hour break, I'd have one drink, right? But by the end of the day, it's 10 drinks, And I remember telling my therapist, and I was like, am I going to withdraw if I try to stop? She's like, well, let's count. When was the last time we didn't have a drink? And I couldn't remember, And I was like, probably months. And so after I had that awakening and ended up in the hospital, I went to a meeting and I've been clean since.
And for the record, right, like you would have probably been much worse off if you weren't as active in your fitness, like in your lifestyle, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because
absolutely.
What's actually even more scary is that like we're not terminally unique, right? So like the life that you were living right before you landed in the hospital, like especially with that persona, right, of like being in Old City or being in Rittenhouse, like think about how many people are actually still currently living that life, but just because it's wine or alcohol, they think that it's okay. You know what I mean? And that's the scary part, is like, and essentially also kind of ties into why I wanted to have you on, because like people need to hear that. Like if that's like something that you're currently going through, it's not normal. Although it might become the normal. Like that's not, and if you think that it is normal, try not to drink tonight. Right. Tell me how it goes. You know what I mean?
Right.
All right. So you went to the hospital. We went to a meeting when you got out.
Yes.
And crazy enough, it works.
It works.
You know what I mean?
And, and I've had people ask me since, well, do you think you could have controlled it better? Or, if you were married and you had support and whatever, or I wasn't in that bad relationship. The answer is I don't know and I don't need to know, right? Like I'm sure if things were going well, I would have continued to do it, right? And I wouldn't have hit that bottom or ended up in the hospital only 8 months into it, which again could have set me up for way worse consequences than I experienced at the time. And there's people that do, but then the minute they go through a breakup, they're right back into it, and again, all I've known is recovery or heroin addiction, and drinking just doesn't work for me, so I was like, I'm not going to go and test the waters out again to see if I can, it's just not it for me.
I mean, what really like made me, like the light come on when somebody asked me this question, they were like, Chris, have you ever gotten high when you had a girlfriend? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, "What, did you ever get high when you didn't have a girlfriend?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Right.
They're like, "What about when you had a job?" And I'm like, "Of course."
Right.
"What about when you didn't have a job?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Did you ever get high when you were like living at your parents' house?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "What about when you weren't?" I'm like,
Right.
"Yeah." They were like, "So maybe it has nothing to do with all of that."
Right.
Or it has, what I'm trying to say is like,
Right.
you know what I mean? So like maybe not, right? But like turns out what's the catalyst, right? Is like I always come back to recovery.
Right.
Turns out my baseline just doesn't want me there.
Right.
You
And
know?
I mean, again, they say drug addiction or whatever addiction or substance you use, right? It's just an escape to find some type of external thing to make you feel whole internally, right? So like the core of the issue is within me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my environment. It could, your environment, I do believe like you are who you hang with, right? That can influence you. Your environment can absolutely influence you. But it comes down to like your relationship with self, right? And like certain limiting beliefs that you might believe and all these things that if we don't work on ourselves continuously, right? Or consistently rather, we can fall back into those patterns and want to escape. I know, I can get obsessive about fitness, right? And meal prepping and measuring my food. And because I might be uncomfortable or experiencing some sort of discomfort, so I'm looking for something else to control, right? So if I look good, I'm going to feel good. Well, I can look good all I want. I still, when I put my head down on the pillow, my thoughts will still race if I'm not okay with self, right?
It's the same. It's literally the same as drinking and drugging, right? Like all that stuff works until it doesn't. Until I go back to what works 100% of the time.
Right.
The issue with me is that like people that don't suffer like us won't get it, right? But it's like when I put it in me, what works for me, I can't stop.
Right.
And then when I'm stopped, I'm thinking about it the entire time.
Absolutely.
It's this weird conundrum, but you're talking about it without actually talking about it. It's like if I'm not okay with self, but really spiritually,
right,
all bets are off. Right.
And we have these like masks, right, that we put on to fit in society or whatever we think our position is in society, right? So like my coach, when I played soccer, would say, I was the player that would run it all the way down. I was playing forward, go down a defense because a defender was too slow or wasn't doing her job.
Wasn't good enough, yeah.
Right, to like save and grab the ball and kick it back over. And my coach was like, just play your position. Stop going to play other positions and try and save the day. And so, but also I think society makes us believe like our job or whatever, your position as a parent, or you have to do this or do that, or uphold a certain standard, right? That we really don't know who we are or what we like. And until we have an experience of being able to get a taste of something that like puts a fire under our ass, we might live our lives like that the entire time.
So it was really profound what you like talked about with like your coach, right? And like I know that we're going over and it doesn't really matter, but and they might not have like even meant it this way, or maybe they did. Maybe they were smarter than we thought back then, and you know what I mean? Maybe they meant exactly what they were saying. But like I don't know what it's written in the basic text, but like in the big book of AA, it says like with like the third step prayer, right? Like essentially I'm like signing up in the third step to like play the role that God assigns me.
Right.
So like my life is really none of my concern anymore.
Right.
The problem is that again, I wake up every day and my baseline stuck on self where I'm like, where's my vape? It's usually not too far away because I sleep with it right here. But I still like search for that, right? Immediately it's like, what the fuck do I got to do at work today?
Right.
Like, what is this person going to like say when, when I interact with them? Immediately it's like, and I forget about like what I can pack into the stream of life. And it's all about like what I can do.
Right.
But it's the same exact thing. Your position, your coach was just like, dude, just play your fucking position.
Right.
Stop trying to like run the show.
And I think we try to play so many positions as humans in life and in society just to feel good enough about ourselves.
Yeah.
Or feel like we have some type of purpose where really we might be missing the purpose completely. When it comes to fitness, for me, right, I think we live in a society and a time where everybody is seeking instant gratification, right? We found ways as humans to make it very readily available to feel good right now.
Yep.
And some things.
Or to look good right now.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, listen, I get Botox. I'm due for Botox.
I was talking about the Ozempic. I was talking about Ozempic. But,
I mean, to each its
but
own.
no, I hear you. And I actually thought about getting Botox sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
I'm starting to look old.
Right. But there's certain things that have more consequences than others, right? In terms of like finding something outside of yourself to make you feel good internally, which again doesn't last, right? And for me, the experience I have with fitness, again, kind of like soccer, it's like a universal language, right? So some people have no idea about my story or about my using history, right? And we still connect on a level of like, okay, we don't feel good. So we're trying to take care of ourselves. And whatever the reason is that they come into my studio or put in, an inquiry or hop on a call or DM or come take a class. For some people, it's just like, I want to lose weight or I don't want to get diabetes or whatever. But there's some type of fear instilled in them, right? And we're also in a society, thankfully, that like now health and wellness is becoming like a big trend.
Very much is.
And so with that being said, there's like a lot of conversations of like mindset and lifestyle changes, and it doesn't happen overnight. So I feel like there's so many parallels with recovery and fitness, right? Of just like moving your body and your mind would follow, right? Doing the work, going to meetings, just shuffling your feet. Eventually it's going to click, right? Keep showing up consistently. It's not going to happen overnight. If people come to me and they're like, I want to lose 10 pounds in 30 days, I'm like, I'm the wrong person.
Yeah.
I can make it happen, but it's not sustainable.
There's not going to be anything healthy about it.
And your motive for it is, you're going to end up being disappointed and not fulfilled, right? And what's the reason you want to lose 10 pounds in 30 days? And again, if people want to look good, I support that. Come to me. You're going to get way more than the aesthetic that you're shooting for. And I think people also discover that once they do achieve a certain aesthetic, they stay because it feels good, right? And I think it makes people start, to feel certain things by themselves while they're working out that they don't generally, right? If that kind of makes sense. And then they start being reflective or thinking about their life or trauma or, oh, this really helped me emotionally. Why, right? A lot of people don't scratch the surface of like any type of depth, right? It's too scary. It's too vulnerable. And I think moving your body in a certain way, kind of against your will, like against your control, creates some type of like connection to your higher self.
Absolutely. I mean, so the way that I work out and the way that you work out is two completely different ways, right? But the way that I can relate to it, right, is like if I'm going for like a rep in whatever I'm doing, right, and like it's clearly too much weight, but I have somebody on top of me that like is barely touching the bar, and I'm able to get it up. Like there is growth in every single rep in that sense. You know what I mean? Not in like a muscle sense, but it's like we are so much more capable than what we think we can do. And I think that's what you're kind of saying, because there is a connection there. But at least that's how I interpret it, right? Because it's like, I never thought I would bench the weight that I bench,
I mean, it gives you confidence and self-worth. And again, not just because of the outside. And a lot of people too, when they get clean because they get out of jail and they're on parole and they have to, right? And some of them stay because it feels good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they get to access that feeling just by showing up.
Yeah.
So I think, again, I'm super blessed that I've had the opportunity to find something that I enjoy doing and also be able to relate it to the way I live my life in general today. Because I think it's a whole thing. You can't work out 5 days a week and eat McDonald's all the time.
I mean, I do.
Yeah.
I mean,
it looks like it's working though.
I pay the price because I feel like shit the majority of the time, right? I can't imagine if I were to actually like tone up my diet.
I mean, maybe we should get McDonald's after this.
I mean, I had Taco Bell before this. So.
Okay, nice.
But yeah, I mean, like that's again, right? Like you want to talk about like instant gratification.
Mm-hmm.
I find it through stuff like that, right? To the point where and we can go on a whole tangent here where it's like, I'll hide that from people,
right?
You know? But yeah, if I actually really like toned up my diet or actually like had discipline to like meal prep. And if I actually like brought my meals to work and like, you know, I've scaled, like I've weighed my food before, right? Like, and if I actually was consistent with that, I know that I would be blown away with the results that I could have.
Yeah.
The hard part is the consistency, right? Not even the discipline, but it's the consistency.
Absolutely.
And me wanting instant gratification, right?
Yeah.
Because like working in somewhat of a sales position, there's times where I do lunches.
Right.
Am I going to get the salad or am I going to get like the pasta?
Right.
You know, like which one is it going to be?
Yeah.
But not to talk too much on that, but you talked a lot about like your purpose without even really knowing that you're talking about your purpose.
Okay. Yeah.
So like, how have you turned all of this pain, which we didn't even really talk about half of it.
Okay.
But like, I'm sure people, if they've listened this far, can really kind of understand and interpret how much pain you did go through. But how have you turned your pain into that purpose?
So I think, well, not I think, you know, it's been talked about, right? That the amount of pain and suffering we go through is like a direct reciprocal to the possible joy, right? We can achieve, right? Or get to. And so I know for me, once I started experiencing that joy, right? Like I'm a new woo-woo nerdy. I love the moon. I could stare at the moon and like feel so fucking happy, right?
Are you a crystals girl?
I am a crystal.
Okay.
I'm a Pisces, so it comes with the.
Okay.
And I'm a lesbian. It just kind of all goes.
Just comes
together.
with the.
Yeah, it just comes with it. It's kind of like fries and a burger at McDonald's. You can't have one without the other.
Good to know.
But so once I started experiencing joy from such little things and experiences, and so much joy, right? Because I just feel things deeply. I think I just naturally started being attracted to certain things and people that can enhance that feeling. And through that, I found fitness, right? And I do really enjoy helping people. I do enjoy teaching, right? And creating. And even when we talked on the phone, like I like bringing people together and creating a community and showing opportunities and all that type of stuff. And I think I tried to play that position using too, you know, and, but it was a lot of suffering and pain and wanting to end my life multiple times. Right. And, so I don't think I turned it into purpose. Right. I think the universe and community and opportunities and, you know, doors that were cracked open, but I decided to like push a little harder, right? That I was able to like create this recipe of something that I enjoy and take all that and be like, I didn't go through all that for nothing, right?
No.
To just live a normal sedentary life, you know? And I think the highest form of self-care is movement, right? And being vulnerable with another human being, right? Like, I think those are the two best things, and being a service, obviously, right? But, and I think that's self-care. Like people say self-care is getting your nails done, whatever. Sure. I love doing that. I love getting a massage, right? But when it comes to like moving my body and the vehicle that I'm in, like this is my costume for this lifetime, right? And I like doing pretty cool shit. So I want.
Did you just allude to the fact that you're coming back in another lifetime?
I mean, yes, I believe so.
Okay.
We could do that episode 3.
Yeah, that'll be 2.2.
Right. But yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot of parallels. And when people get to a certain amount of pain, it's either you change or you dig deep, right? And when you dig deep, you have these profound moments and opportunities to actually find what you're in alignment with in life. And if not, then I think the universe just redirects you. And it's like that door, we pushed it a little too hard. There's this door over there. Let's try and crack it open.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with my recovery, right? Where it's like, sure, you've heard it a ton. I know that it's been the past 10 years have literally looked like this, where it's like, my recovery has not been like linear or looked like the same over the last 10 years. It's never looked, it's always peaks and valleys, right? So like, I'll do really well, I'll fall off, right? And then I'll get in a lot of pain through, whether it be like, trying to make more money or like find like stuff that I find enjoyment through that I turn out doing too much of, or whatever the case may be. Then I get in a ton of pain. And then when the pain's great enough, I come back, right? Yeah. The hard part for people like us is like, when I'm in enough pain, there's two choices. It's like, I'm either going to turn back to I know what works, right? Would help me recreate my life essentially. For all things considered God, right? Or I go and just seek more relief and eventually I get high.
Right.
And it's like, I feel like that's the same for a lot of us. I wish that I could be the guy that was like, for the last 10 years, I've sponsored 1 million people. I've never had a bad day. Me and God are tight.
Right.
No, there's days where I wake up and I am God.
Yeah.
But essentially where you've kind of, the way that I interpret it is that like your purpose is like you transform lives, right? Outside of the rooms, outside of like a 12-step fellowship, outside of recovery.
I don't want to give me that much credit.
Right. But you do.
Right.
You do, right? Because like you train a lot of clients and you get to see them maybe not all change physically, right? But like absolutely. the mindset could change.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah. And I mean, I have a lot of these clients, but this one that we've been trying to get her to do a push-up, right? And the goal was to like do a push-up on the ground without your hands elevated or on your knees or whatnot. So she's like, I just want to try it. And I'm like, all right. And she tried it. And the excitement that I got, and I'm like, okay, if she can get better. Sometimes I think I'm different and I'm just never going to get better at running ever. Right. And she just did a push-up, and she could barely bend her elbows, 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, they helped me just as much as I helped them, but I have had periods of time in recovery where I think I've actually been in more pain than I was using.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
especially the past, I would say like in 2021, 2022, around there. I was really forced to just feel. Nothing worked, going on Bumble or Hinge or going on dates or watching Netflix or eating burgers. Like I literally had a toolbox of, okay, this is what can make me feel good temporarily. It's not going to last, but the consequences aren't too high, right? And I'd pull out of that toolbox and I tried. Like
sorting through, like, what are we going to do today?
I'm like, all right, we're not going to go on Bumble this week, right? But let me binge watch Netflix, and nothing worked. Like literally nothing worked. And that's when I really got into meditation and spirituality and pulled out my crystals again.
I was going to say crystals, yeah.
And, but was forced to just sit with self, right? And discover, like, I think we're going to meet and we meet different versions of ourselves throughout our entire lifetime, right? And we go through things so that we can peel the layer of the onion a little bit more. Right. So I'm going to fuck up and I'm going to, get into, I hope I don't get into any more relationships, put me in fetal position.
Unhealthy relationships.
Right. Yeah. Right. But, I think I'm going to go through things just by trial and error because we don't know. There isn't a blueprint per se. Yeah. Right. For us, the blueprints don't get high and things can work out, but it's much bigger than that too. So, next year, the sage might not work. I might really have to like journal more, Yeah. Or there are just certain things that no longer work and you just got to keep trying. But I think that's a cool thing about being human is you get to like rediscover yourself every so many years.
We can do whatever we want.
Exactly.
You know?
Like there's no rules.
In a healthy way, right?
Right.
Like we can
Like,
do whatever we want.
Don't break
like,
the law, but there's no laws, you know?
Yeah. I mean, listen, if like the meditation isn't working, right? Maybe a year from now, it would be like an ice bath meditation, right? I won't even get an ice bath, but like,
They're cool.
I
did that
I'm
for
also
a little bit.
content prior to investigation.
Right.
So is there anything else you want to say before we shut it down? Because I feel like the type of people that we are, we could run out the battery. We could
absolutely.
Which it's all great stuff.
Right.
And my hope is that there's more to come in the coming weeks, months, whatever it may be, without alluding to too much. But is there anything else you want to do? Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to shout out?
I don't know. I just, I do like to talk about and say, yes, we're in recovery and we've been through a lot, but that doesn't take away from other human beings that are not in recovery and have not been through a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're no different. We just, our path was a little bit different, or we took a detour. And I think that fitness can, just taking care of self in any shape, way, or form is necessary, not just for recovering addicts, right? And I hope that, what you do with all these podcasts too can reach people and that people that are not in recovery also listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it literally can apply to everybody. Our story is just a little different. Like sugar is sugar. You might like cheesecake. I like chocolate and cheesecake. But you know what I mean? Like everybody has their shit, right? But at the end of the day, it's like all the same. We're just trying to figure out who the fuck we are a day at a time, And
just pack a little bit good into the world, right? With a lot of shit that's going on, right? Like just like if I can do a little bit good, then I did my job.
Absolutely.
I don't need to save everybody, right?
No.
But if I can be a listening ear for somebody,
right?
And maybe even just like walk life with them, rock out, let's do it.
Yeah.
So with that, I fucking forgot to do it again. I do it every single time I do a fucking podcast a week. I forget to do my own plugs.
Okay, go ahead.
So, whatever. Like us on Instagram at Pain W Purpose, YouTube Pain with a Purpose Podcast, and on Apple and Spotify, Pain with a Purpose Podcast. Smash that like button, the whole nine. I don't know. Maybe I should just pre-record it.
You should.
That's what I should do, right?
Yeah.
If I was smart enough, I would have came up with that weeks ago.
You should just put a little.
So I do that too.
Post it. Don't forget to.
Yeah. Because I got to get people engaging more. But like we'll figure that out. So anything else before we shut it down?
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. I was going to keep asking until you said thank you. I was going to keep asking until you said thank you. I'm just kidding.
No, seriously, it's. I'm glad we connected. I know we've had good conversations prior to this, and we will after this as well. And again, like if anybody is, I'm an open book, right? Like my DMs are open, right? My information's out there, my email's out there. I think again, just finding one person to tell or to ask for help is the most important thing.
Whether you're in recovery or not.
Absolutely.
Right? Or even whether you're struggling with substance abuse or alcoholism or not, right? It could be anything.
Right. It's not that black and white. Yeah.
All right, cool.
I think that's it. That's all she wrote.
So with that, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening.